Senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, I think it's kind of unprecedented that you'd have in this case, the acting chairman and the ranking member to be so close together on what we've attempted to do. And I think it's worthwhile, as Senator Reed did bring up, that we had the committee hearing on this. And it's very rare that we come out as we did in that. We actually did that in one day. One day, it was 9 hours total. I'm not sure that's some kind of a record or not, but it shows that we're working very well together. And I was hoping that would go ahead and take care of this today. But anyway, we are now going to start discussing this bill. I think it's more important now since we've lost the opportunity to move to the bill and actually start in on amendments to at least talk about what we are anticipating. And today we'll begin with the consideration. Even though we're not on the bill, we can still talk about it. And this is the John S. McCain National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2019. It's the most important piece of legislation to consider every year. As I said, that this is now the 57th consecutive year that we've done this. I can remember just a few years ago, we got very close to the middle of December or the end of December, which is an absolute deadline to get it done for the fiscal year. And we had to go to the Big Four, and we got it done, got it passed. Well, we don't want to do that now. We wanted to do it the right way, and we want to consider all the amendments, because on that year, we got the bill. We didn't consider any amendments. And, you know, we've talked to, you can talk to any of the members. A lot of times they were in closed meetings. We talked about the necessity to get the amendments opened up so that anyone could offer an amendment, and of course they were denied doing that at that time. But now we are still in a position we can do it. It has put it off about a week. But anyway, this is the most important legislation that we pass every year. And I want to thank one more time Senator Jack Reed, the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, for his work on this and the fact that we were able to do it so rapidly as we did. And I also want to thank the Majority Leader, Senator McConnell, for not only bringing the NDAA to the floor this week, but his willingness to do so under regular order. That's what we wanted, and we were able to do it. But I think finally, and the most importantly, I want to thank the committee chairman, Senator John McCain, for his strong leadership in the preparation for the NDAA this year, as he's done each year for a long period of time. And make no mistake, he may not be here today, but this is his bill. His priorities, his policy objectives are in this bill. This year's NDAA is a true embodiment of what the Chairman McCain has worked to advance during his decades of service and tenure as chairman of this committee. He deserves to bear his name, and it does bear his name. We're all keeping Chairman McCain in our hearts and our prayers as he continues to prove that he's the fighter we all know him to be. You know, I'm sure he's watching right now, and Senator McCain, we all know the fighter you are. There's no one else like you, and so we want you to continue that fight, and we're anticipating that is going to be taking place. The NDAA represents some of the finest traditions in this body. For 57 years, as I mentioned, Congress has passed the vital legislation to authorize funding and provide for necessary authority for our military to protect this great nation. I'm proud that the Senate Armed Services Committee overwhelmingly passed this bill. I think we actually had, at one point, we had 300 amendments that we were able to sit down, reason together, incorporate several of them in a manager's package, and come to the floor and actually passed it unanimously. We didn't have one dissenting vote in the committee. That was almost unheard of. And it's not more than just a piece of legislation. It's a message to each and every one of our service members that you're our number one priority. And that's why I didn't like the idea that there's an objection to moving on to this bill today. Because as I was with them all last week, those who are overseas, and telling them what we were going to do, why we're going to do it, why it has the top priority, and unfortunately this sends a wrong message to them. But it's more than just a piece of legislation. It's what we have to do to defend you. After all, you got to keep in mind that the number one thing that we need to be doing in this, here in the United States Senate, as well as in the House, is defending America. You know, our founding fathers said that, it's in the Constitution, and that's what we're about to do now. So the fiscal year 19, the NDAA keeps faith with our troops. It has a 2.6% pay raise, the largest in 10 years. In some small way, it honors their enormous sacrifice. In total, the NDAA supports $716 billion in fiscal year 2019 for national defense. It authorizes a base defense budget of $639 billion for the Department of Defense and the national security programs, and then some in the Department of Energy that are related to our national defense, as well as $69 billion in the overseas contingency fund. When it all adds up to, you've got $716 billion, and that's what we should be doing around here. We're glad we got to the point where we can give the top priority to defending our nation, as it should have always been. Now, this is funding an important step toward recovering from years of cuts in our defense budget, and under the Budget Control Act and sequestration that harmed our military readiness and slowed down our modernization efforts. As I mentioned before, you know, sequestration has held us back, but it has not held our adversaries back. All the time that we were held back over the last 10 years, our peer competition out there, Russia and China, they haven't been holding back. And that's why I said in areas such as the artillery, they're ahead of us. You know, every time I go, and I'm sure the chair finds the same thing to be true, you go back home where the real people are, and they assume that we have the best of everything, because we have. That was kind of a standard that we set in World War II, and then, of course, we backed away from that. So we have areas, not just artillery, in the triad that we had. We were not able to keep that up, and all the time we were doing nothing for the last 10 years in the triad system. The Chinese and the Russians were advancing, and they're ahead of us now. Hypersonic is something not many people know about. It's a weapon system that moves 5 times the speed of sound, and this is something that is going to be where future wars are going to be fought. And yet China and Russia are both ahead of us right now. And so we're, with this bill, going back and are advancing in some areas where we've been very, very slow. And the goal, as always, is to provide our warfighters with the resources and capabilities they need, and to do so on time, on schedule, and at a reasonable cost. Now, I'm going to run over this because I think it's important that people out there know, and even some members in this chairman, this body, if they're not on the committee, they might not be aware of it. But it's an authorization, and what the legislation does, it authorizes starting with $23 billion for shipbuilding to fund 10 new construction battle force ships. It provides a procurement of 117 naval aviation aircraft. It has $7.6 billion to procure 75 F-35 Joint Strike Fighters, and I think we all recognize the mistake that we made back when we had the F-22. We should at that time have stayed with the original amount, and now we regret that we didn't do it. We don't want to make that same mistake with the F-35, so we have that provision in there. We have $2.3 billion to procure 14 KC-46s. This is kind of interesting because that's going to ultimately replace the KC-135s, which have been around for 58 years now. You know, I can remember in the last administration, the Secretary of the Air Force was having an event, and I remember commenting out at Altus Air Force Base. I said, in 1959, 2 wonderful things happened. Number 1, I got married, and number 2, we had delivered our first KC-135. And she said, well, I guess that offers security for you here at Altus for the next 59 years. And I think it does. That's how important that is. Our KC-46s are necessary, and of course this has the procurement of 14 of these. It's an addition that we have. We have $350 million to procure Air Force light attack aircraft. Procurement of 117 Army helicopters, $17 million to prototype the next generation combat vehicle, and $100 million each for for the U.S. For the Marine Corps light aircraft and the Group 5 unmanned aerial system. And lastly, $10 billion, that's for missile defense, for the Missile Defense Agency. And that's finally getting us up where we have fallen behind during the last administration. Might as well say it as it is. Now we have everyone agreeing that this is good. This is in the bill that we have unnecessarily postponed for another week. And so I guess that's, someone's making a point there. But along the way, the NDAA makes adjustments to the administration's budget request to ensure programs are sustainable and accountable in protecting American tax dollars. So it also takes steps to ensure that we're prepared for a world defined by strategic competition with China and Russia, addressing China's militarization in the South China Sea, and deterring Russia's military aggression and cyber attacks. We know that's happening right now. And several of us, including the chair, we were not long ago, just about a month ago, in the South China Sea. And when you look and you see what the Chinese are doing, totally illegally, it's not land that they own. They talk about reclaiming land. They're not reclaiming land. It wasn't previously claimed by anybody. But they have 7 islands now out there. We're talking about over 33,000 acres that is out there that they've created huge military formations out there. Now, when you look at these, you see, and all of our allies in that part of the world are assuming that they're having to now say, take sides in what might be World War III. Because when you see what they're putting on these islands, it's all military, 100% of it, just as if they're preparing for World War III. It's a huge thing that's happening right now. We saw it there, and we know that they are projecting. And by the way, it's not just the South China Seas. We just got back from Djibouti, and for the first time in the history of China, they now have military bases that are not within the confines of China. So this supports the implementation of a nuclear posture review by authorizing $65 million to develop a low-yield submarine-launched ballistic missile. I know that's controversial. I know that there are going to be amendments on there, and we look forward to that. You know, the ranking member and I don't agree on everything, and this is one area that probably we don't agree on. But we want to have amendments. We want to have open debate, and that's what we're going to have. Unfortunately, that's just going to be delayed for a period of time that I believe is unnecessary. Finally, the NDAA supports our allies and partners around the world. It authorizes $5.2 billion for the Afghanistan Security Forces Fund. We just got back from Afghanistan. Things are really going well there. We had a chance to talk to General Nicholson and some of the rest of them over there, and good things are happening in spite of what an unfriendly press sometimes wants to lead you to believe. For the fight against terrorism, it authorizes $1.2 billion in funding for the counter-ISIS efforts via the Train and Equip program in Iraq and Syria. The Train and Equip program is one that I think we all agree, at least on the committee, that it's very important to continue that. It authorizes $6.3 billion for the European Deterrence Initiative and $200 million for security assistance to the Ukraine, including defensive lethal assistance. This is something we should have done a long time ago. I happened to be in Ukraine when they had their last election. Well, actually not the last election, but about 3 years ago. And that was the time when, for the first time in 96 years, the Ukraine doesn't have one communist in its parliament. They did that because they love us. And then, of course, Putin came in and started killing them. We know what happened there. It was well publicized. And yet we had the opportunity to send some lethal defensive equipment over there to help them, since they have this love for the West. And at that time, the administration wouldn't allow that to take place. Well, anyway, we authorized $500 million for Israeli cooperative missile defense programs. And by the way, I always like to say, when we're talking about Israel, there's kind of an assumption out there that they're dormant and we're providing this. They actually have developed some systems over there that are superior to ours. There's no better relationship anywhere in the world than between the United States and Israel. And good things are happening there. We have a president who's very strongly in support of that. And of course, we have a great guy over there with, that looks to us as their closest friend. It also includes the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act that was adopted by the Senate Banking Committee, and will give the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States the authority it needs to address some of their national security concerns. As we move forward to considering the fiscal year 19 NDAA, we've got to remember that our primary constitutional responsibility is to provide the common defense. We forget that. There are people who go back home and never even talk about defending America. And they kind of play on this assumption that we already have all that we need, and that's no longer a mission that is worth fighting for. We've got to face the facts that this is the most dangerous world we've ever faced. The military advantage that we once enjoyed has eroded, and we cannot delay modernization of our capabilities. You know, you don't have to go any further than to look at some of these countries, like North Korea. Right now, some good things are happening, and it looks forward to, I believe in 6 days from now, a meeting is going to take place between Kim Jong-un and our president. It's unprecedented, and I'm very excited about it. But nonetheless, in this world today, you can have one small country that has the capability of wiping out an American state. And it's something that we haven't been dealing with in the past. And that's all part of this bill that we're talking about now, that we're going to be passing and then going to conference with the House. Today, our nation commemorates its 74th anniversary of D-Day. The brave Americans who stormed the beaches of Normandy embody the spirit that continues to inspire the services and sacrifice of so many, fighting sometimes against insurmountable odds in the name of freedom, and we've won. So I urge my colleagues to keep in mind the meaning of this day throughout the consideration of this legislation. The John S. McCain National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2019 will help assert the quantitative and qualitative military advantage that we will have, and I would almost say reassert that, because we have lost it. It was General Dumford who made the statement that we are falling behind in what has always been our qualitative and quantitative advantage over the enemy. So it's my hope and the hope of the ranking member Reid that we can move forward with it, an open amendment process. It's very important. This is the one that we all agreed on, and we're hoping that we'd be in that process right now, and it didn't happen. Now it's unfortunately sometimes it's going to be lost. So we're committed to working with everyone here as soon as possible and get the amendments rolling. So anyway, I just would, I want to yield to Senator Reid, but before I do, I just want to make sure that we get on the record that I've never seen in the years that I've been here more cooperation that we have between the Democrats and Republicans on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and I will yield the floor.